Well, hello, All Faith Chapel Children's Church. It's me, Miss Trish. I hope you're having an awesome week. And today we're going to talk about resurrection. I don't know if you remember us talking about that before and what that big word means, but let's start off by talking about, have you ever had a situation in your life or in your family's life where things looked really hopeless? There was no hope, but then everything turned out just fine. So Mr. Mike and I have a story where things looked a little bit hopeless. So when Mr. Mike first was trying to get into the military, he tried to get in and they told him, no thank you. He had some medical issues and some things that they said, no thank you. And so years went on and Mr. Mike was working in a job and he didn't really like the job that much. It was really difficult and we were living in a place that we didn't really want to be living in. It was a hard place to live. And so things for us looked pretty hopeless. At that time, Isla and Isaac were both little babies and things were really difficult. And so it was really hard to have hope because we weren't, the situation felt a little bit hopeless. So then Mr. Mike got another interview to go into the Navy, go into the military, and he went to the interview in Washington, D.C., and surprise, a couple days later, we got the call that he got in to the Navy. And within about a month, we were moving from Michigan to North Carolina. And it was a really good move for our family. It was a job that Mr. Mike liked a lot more. And it was a great move for our family. So, the situation looked really hopeless at first, but God turned it around and turned it into a situation that was really good for our family. So I'm wondering if you have seen any situations with yourself or with your family where things looked pretty hopeless, but then they turned around. So we're going to be talking about hope today, resurrection, and we're going to talk about hope. So we're going to learn today about how Jesus gives us hope. We're going to read in the Bible about a man named Lazarus, and you might be familiar with that name, but he died actually in the Bible story, but it wasn't actually the end of things for him because of Jesus. So let's find out what happened. Now, the Bible story today is a little bit long, so I'm just going to give you that warning that hopefully you can hang in there with me. I'm actually going to read it from the children's Bible that I often use in children's church, maybe just to make it a little bit more understandable. But I'll read from my children's Bible, and we're in John chapter 11, and I'll read verses 1 through 45. So Lazarus was a Jew who lived in the village of Bethany with his two sisters, Mary and Martha. Since their home was near Jerusalem, Jesus often stopped in to visit them on his way to attend the feast at the temple. Always, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus welcomed him. They loved him dearly and believed that he was the Christ. One day, while Jesus taught the people in the country east of Jordan, a messenger came from Bethany. Mary and Martha had sent the messenger to tell Jesus, "Lord, the one you love is sick." The anxious sisters thought Jesus would come at once and heal their brother. They knew his great power, how much they needed him now. But Jesus didn't go at once. He explained to his disciples, "Lazarus' sickness is for the glory of God." The sisters were greatly disappointed when the messenger returned without Jesus. They watched their brother grow weaker and weaker, and then he died. They were grief-stricken. Why didn't Jesus come? Still, they hoped he would come, for he had raised the dead to life. The day passed, but Jesus didn't arrive. At last, the neighbors and friends came to help wrap Lazarus' body to be buried. They carried him to a burial cave. Mary and Martha followed, weeping bitterly. They saw Lazarus laid in the cave and watched the great stone rolled over the opening. Still, Jesus had not come. 2 days after receiving the message from Mary and Martha, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let's go back to Judea again." The disciples didn't like the idea. They answered, Master, when you were there before, some of the people tried to stone you. Why go back? Our friend Lazarus sleeps, Jesus told them. I go to awaken him. At first, the disciples thought Lazarus must be getting better. Then Jesus told them that Lazarus was dead. He said, for your sakes, I'm glad I was not there, so that you can believe. Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. The sisters thought it would be too late for Jesus to help them now, even if he did come. Friends came from Jerusalem to comfort the sisters, but it was Jesus they wanted the most. At last, word came that Jesus and the disciples were nearing the village. Martha ran to meet him. Lord, she cried, if only you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. To comfort her, Jesus said, your brother will rise again. I know he'll be resurrected in the last days, she answered. But that wasn't what Jesus meant. He explained, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believes in me, though he dies, yet he will live. And those who live and believe in me shall never die. Do you believe this? He asked. Martha answered, yes, Lord, I believe you're the Christ, the Son of God. But Martha didn't really understand what Jesus meant. She left him and hurriedly called to her sister Mary. The master wants to see you, Mary, she said. Mary hurried to meet Jesus and found him resting by the roadside. Falling at his feet, she sobbed, Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. The Jews who had come from Jerusalem to comfort the sisters saw Mary leave the house in a great hurry. They thought she was going to Lazarus' grave, so they followed. When they saw her fall weeping at Jesus' feet, they wept aloud. Where have you laid Lazarus' body? Jesus asked. And they took him to the cave. Jesus wept in sympathy when he looked at the sisters and their sorrowing friends. The Jews whispered, see how much he loved Lazarus? Surely this man who opened blind eyes could have healed Lazarus. While they talked, Jesus commanded someone roll the stone away from the front of the cave. Martha exclaimed, Lord, he's been dead for 4 days. By this time his body is decaying. Jesus answered, did I not tell you that you would see the glory of God if you believed? The stone was rolled away. While the people watched, Jesus lifted his eyes to heaven and said, Father, I thank you that you've heard me, and I know that you hear me always. I say this so the people who are here may believe that you sent me. Then Jesus looked out the door of the cave and cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out! Speechless, the people watched. How astonished they were to see Lazarus get up and come out. Whoa, that's a crazy story, isn't it? So we read about Lazarus today. He was sick, right? And Mary and Martha, his sisters, took care of him while he was sick. Have you ever been really, really sick? Maybe even so sick that you were scared that, I don't know, you were going to just get sicker and sicker. Well, I've been that sick before. It's not pleasant, is it? So even though Mary and Martha took care of their brother Lazarus, he kept getting sicker and sicker. And so they sent someone to tell Jesus that Lazarus was very, very sick, that it was serious. And we know because the Bible tells us that Jesus loved Lazarus and Mary and Martha. But he didn't hurry to Lazarus' house to heal him. And he tells us that he did that to show how great God was. He waited 2 days to go see Lazarus. And I just think about Mary and Martha waiting. You know, they hoped that Jesus would come and heal their brother, but they just had to sit around and wait. Have you ever had to just sit around and wait? It's really, really hard. Like sometimes in church, you have to just sit quietly and wait for church to be over, or maybe you have to sit in a waiting room somewhere. It's really, really hard to sit and wait. So while Mary and Martha were waiting, Lazarus actually died. But we know that wasn't the end of the story. So both Mary and Martha said to Jesus, if you would have got here, my brother wouldn't have died. And Jesus says to them, your brother will rise again. And they misunderstand him. Martha thinks that what he means is in the end times, that once his body has been in the grave for a while, eventually it'll rise up to heaven. But that's not what Jesus meant. So Jesus says to her in verse 25, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even though he dies. And then he says to Martha, do you believe this? And she says, yes. So Martha hurries back to the house and tells her sister Mary that Jesus is there. And Jesus was really deeply troubled when he talks with Mary. He asks her, "Where did you put Lazarus's body?" And they take him to Lazarus, right? Jesus cries when he goes to the tomb and sees where Lazarus has been laid. Have you ever thought about that? That Jesus actually cried. He was sad. You know, Jesus had feelings just like you and I do. His friend had died and he was sad about that. And so Martha tells him, "Jesus, he's been dead for 4 days already. He might be smelling already." And Jesus says, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you'd see God's glory?" And Jesus he had the stone taken away, and then he yelled for Lazarus to come out. "Lazarus, come out." And Lazarus came out. He walked out of the grave. And Jesus said, "Take off his grave clothes and let him go." So Jesus actually brought Lazarus back to life after he had died. And Jesus also promises us that if we believe in him, we will have life even when we die. What that means is that because we believe in Jesus, we will live with him forever in heaven, even though our bodies might die. And that's really, really good news. We have hope that even when we die, we will still get to live with Jesus forever. I wanted to ask you, have you ever seen a butterfly? Maybe you've even seen a butterfly in a cocoon. I actually wore some butterfly earrings today. I don't know if you can see these. I wore my butterfly earrings today because I wanted to talk a little bit about butterflies. Mr. Mike bought these for me when he was deployed a couple years ago in Latvia. So these are my butterfly earrings. And you know, when a butterfly comes out of a cocoon, we see that kind of in a way it has new life, right? It went into the cocoon, kind of looks like it's dead because it doesn't really move and nothing really happens. It seems to be dead. But we know that it's going to emerge from the cocoon as a butterfly, right? And it will have new life. And that's sort of like what happens when we die. We go into a grave. It seems like it's the end and things are done, but we'll have new life in Jesus in heaven because we believe in him. So you can kind of think about a butterfly when you think about this. I am the resurrection and the life. So in a way, when Lazarus stepped out of the tomb into new life, he was sort of like a butterfly coming out of a cocoon. There's a lot more to the meaning than that, but that's kind of an easy way to think about it. Eventually, Lazarus would die again, his final death, and the Bible doesn't really tell us about that. But death was, no doubt, was still defeated by Jesus's power. We know that Lazarus eventually, went to heaven and could live with Jesus forever. So that is our hope. This week, I want you to look around, and maybe you could look around, and I don't know if there's butterflies around here now. I know just a few months ago, there was a bunch of butterflies that came through our town. Maybe you could look around at things like trees or butterflies and let that remind you of the hope that we have in Jesus. Even when things seem like they're the end or they seem hopeless, there's always hope in Jesus. And we can pray and ask God to fill us up with his hope. Jesus brought Lazarus back to life from death. And that shows us that death is not the final word, that there is always hope in Jesus. So I hope that you can understand that this week. I hope you'll have a great week, and I will see you here again next week. Bye.